July 1674, in the fiery heat of Iran's high summer, Ambrosio Bemba, a 22-year-old Venetian traveler, entered Isfahan, the capital city of Iran, after a long and difficult journey north from the Persian Gulf. His journal records his approach. On the morning of the 18th, I passed a mountain, after which I entered a very great plain and saw Isfahan at a distance. It seems rather a delightful wood due to the multitude of trees which obstruct the view of the buildings. In size and beauty, it surpasses many of the finest cities in Europe. The city which Bembo saw and a traveling companion drew had been a major center of trade and culture long before the young Italian's arrival. Located in the geographical heartland of Iran, the city lay beside the Zayandeh Rud, the life-giving river, whose steady water supplies, so rare in arid Iran, gave sustenance to both Isfahan and the thriving oasis around it. It was already prominent when it fell to the Muslim conquerors of Iran in 643 AD. Like other monuments, the Shahristan Bridge stands as a testimony from that time to more than a millennium of history before Ambrosio Bemba's arrival. But the young Venetian had not come to see ancient Isfahan. The city of fabled reputation, synonymous with opulence and splendor, which he so admired, had been shaped not in 1,000 years, but in barely 30, and by one man alone, Abbas the Great, Emperor of Iran, 5th Shah of the Safavid dynasty. Isfahan's royal and princely inhabitants, Shah Abbas is the clearest historical personality. He came to the throne in 1587 at the age of 16, initially the pawn of semi-independent feudal kingmakers. But within a decade, through a masterful blend of diplomacy and the sword, Abbas crushed his adversaries, drove out foreign invaders, and unified the country politically and religiously under his own firm rule. By nature, he was a demanding man, who also demanded much of himself. He was a passionate hunter, vigorous sportsman, perceptive patron of the arts, and an able conversationalist with a thirst for useful knowledge and a thorough dislike of laziness and fuzzy thinking. But there was a darker side to his personality. He could be unpredictable and cruel, and swift to eliminate possible rivals. A volatile mixture of polarities, Abbas led Iran to a peak of social order, disciplined strength, and prosperity. In 1598, as a sign of his success, he decided to establish his capital in Esfahan. The city had sometimes served as capital for previous rulers and was a rich repository of Iran's past. Many of Isfahan's early buildings testify to this imperial tradition. But of them none rivals in scope and splendor the city's Jami Mosque, a monument to Iran's Muslim faith. Begun in the late 11th century and continued for centuries, the mosque is an organic complex which reflects the plans and passions of generations of builders and patrons. At different times and under different rulers, Iran's Islamic architecture developed a rich and varied vocabulary of visual expression. But the particular brilliance of the Jami Mosque lies in its brickwork, whose decorative patterns underscore structural tensions and delineate in geometric form the pure mathematics of the spirit, Islam's most perfect metaphor of the order and diversity, the unending mystery and beauty of divine creation. Jami Mosque, created over 500 years, was one of the city's towering achievements. And in 1598, to the ambitious Shah Abbas, who sought glory in the art of building as well as that of statecraft, it was clearly a monument to be surpassed. To do so, he had to first rejuvenate his empire's economic life. He began by ordering construction of a vast bazaar stretching more than 3 kilometers southwest from the Jami Mosque. Within the bazaar were shops selling goods brought from all over the world. They were workshops busily producing Iranian goods, both for home consumption and export. Export in particular was a keystone of Abbas's economic policy, and he furthered it by encouraging arts designed for foreign markets, especially Europe. Merchants came to buy ceramics. Potters produced skillful variations on the fashionable Chinese wares so that Iran could acquire a portion of the lucrative trade between Europe and the Far East. Other merchants made the long journey to purchase magnificent carpets. The collective effort of dozens of skilled craftsmen over many months and years. For Iran's own royal or noble houses, others specifically for export to Europe, where they warmed and decorated the floors of aristocratic residences. Key to these international ties was the Christian Armenian community of New Julfa, located across the Zayandeh River from Esfahan. These multilingual merchants served as vital intermediaries between Iran, Europe, and the Far East. In their churches, whose construction Abbas encouraged, is found the most succinct evidence of the Shah's internationalism, a unique blend of 17th century European and Safavid art. Julfa was connected to Esfahan by a great 33-arch bridge constructed in the early years of the 17th century. Its central road carried heavy traffic, while covered walkways offered Esfahan's population pleasant promenades over the river. "325 meters long and more than 16 meters wide, it was only one of many bridges built throughout Iran during Abbas's 42-year reign. Along with new roads, forts, and caravan inns, it represents one of the most far-reaching aspects of the monarch's patronage, the construction of solid utilitarian structures to further Iran's economy. On the Esfahan side of the mighty bridge was the Chehar Bagh, a great avenue extending from the river towards the city center. On it were built most of the principal residences of the nobility and wealthy merchants, a concentration of wealth created by the monarch's social and economic reforms. This was a favorite area for wealthy Isfahanis, whose elegance and languid refinement bespeak a princely ideal as old as Iran itself. Noble society took its ease not only on the long avenue, but also in the many gardens adjoining it. Much of Persian life centered around the garden, whose perfumed atmosphere and cooling waters offered welcome respite from an often hot and usually arid climate. Garden life was captured by the Shah's greatest painter and draftsman, Reza, in graceful visual poems which set both mood and style for much of Isfahan's figural art. Abbas particularly favored the artist's company, watched him work, and greatly admired the flowing line, the brilliant undiluted color, the princely sophistication of his figures. Some of the artist's works are studies in wistful solitude, while others set a more explicit tone, creating a sensuous paradise of pleasure removed from the cares of the outside world. The Shah also supported Reza's son, Shafi, who became Isfahan's most celebrated designer of textiles, as well as a gifted painter, combining both visual accuracy and lushly sensual form. Of all the gardens once belonging to the Safavi royal house, that of the Chehel Sutun is best preserved. It was probably laid out by Shah Abbas himself early in the 17th century. The garden's palace is a pavilion consisting of an open porch supported by 20 slender columns and a throne niche brilliant with many faceted mirrors. The palace was the Shah's private refuge, and its gardens originally extended in a vast geometric pattern to the back of another palace, the Ali Kapu, a portal separating the garden from the turbulent life of the city. Before the 17th century, only open fields stretched beyond this gate. To the Shah, it was an ideal space awaiting his greatest creative effort. In 1602, he ordered the construction of a royal square, which would surpass in size and opulence anything in 17th century Europe. The Meydan-i-Shah was a brilliant creation whose order, harmony, and internal coherence stunned every visitor. Measuring 512 meters in length and 159 meters in width, and strictly oriented on a north-south axis, it was Abbas's most grandiose undertaking, on which he lavished careful planning and enormous expense. But it was neither an empty monument to imperial ambition, nor simply an aesthetic creation on a grand scale. Instead, it was the bustling commercial heart of the empire, vividly reflecting the personality of the emperor and his aspirations for Iran as well. Upper arches of the enclosing arcades served as dwelling places for visiting merchants, while lower arches functioned as shops. It overflowed with activity, and Ambrosio Bembo records that the Meydan was like a continuous fair. There were stands of magicians selling secrets, dancing on ropes, and at sunset, concerts could be heard throughout the whole Meydan. On the east side of the Meydan is the Mosque of Sheikh Lotfallah, built by Abbas between 1602 and 1628 and used as a royal chapel. The dome is not aligned with the entrance, for Islam requires that the mosque's prayer wall point towards Mecca, in Esfahan to the southwest. Thus, the axis of the mosque had to be shifted from the north-south orientation of the Meydan. In Isfahan's bright sunlight, its entrance shimmers with the colors of heaven and earth. Over the door hangs the mukarnas, stalactite squinches spanning the vault beneath a many-faceted surface sparkling with light. Behind its brilliant entrance, a narrow passageway, dimly lit by double-grilled windows, leads towards the mosque's interior. It is a single chamber, a totally enclosed, tightly proportioned world. A square base is transformed with utmost subtlety by wall and corner arches into an octagon, which supports the low dome, a simple shell nearly 12 meters in diameter. Beneath its dome flows the greatest inscription in Esfahan, verses of the Quran written by the hand of Abbas's famed master scribe, Ali Riza Abbasi. Light streams into pure geometric space through 16 double-grilled windows which soften and diffuse outside brightness. It is a quiet, meditative space, intended for the monarch and his family, a private world which underscores the personal relationship between the faith and the Shah, who regarded himself as the spiritual guide of Iranian Islam. Directly across from the Mosque of Sheikh Lutfallah is the Ali Kapu Palace, the administrative heart of Abbas's empire. Here functioned part of the new bureaucracy created by the Shah, enabling him to maintain a large standing army, hold feudal noblemen in check, and tie far-flung provinces to the capital of Iran. In small rooms of the Ali Kapu, the Shah hosted select, intimate gatherings to converse and listen to music. Objects from imperial workshops added to the luxurious ambience. Gilded and silvered cut steel bowls, brass candlesticks adorned with the poetry of love. Objects like these rested on knotted carpets of the rarest type, the arabesque, which were made only for the most noble patrons. Gold and silver fibers enriched the fine silk clothing of the Shah's guests, who sat on carpets woven of silk and precious metals and enlivened with imperial imagery of royal lions, phoenixes, and birds of paradise. Decorated rooms led through hallways to a large pillared porch, a transition from enclosed to open space, from sheltered cool to brilliant sunlight. It was on his porch that the Shah made many of his public appearances, reviewed troops parading in the Maidan, watched military exercises and polo games, received ambassadors, and sometimes even ate his meals. From here, he could view his great Maidan, an architectural creation equaled by few other rulers in history, and a microcosm of his new social order for Iran. To his left, at the far north end of the Maidan, was the entrance portal to the Royal Bazaar, whose passageways linked Abbas's Maidan with the ancient Jami Mosque. Directly in front of him was the Mosque of Sheikh Lutfallah, the royal chapel which symbolized the king's key role as spiritual guide of his country. And on the monarch's right was the Royal Mosque, the official statement of Muslim convictions and the crown of the whole Maidan. Situated on the south side of the square, its towering entrance portal dominates the huge open quadrangle. Its twin minarets soar 34 meters, and the lofty arch between them is 28 meters high. From marble vases symbolically containing the waters of life, rise triple cables ascending to clusters of ceramic squinches. Supported under its glistening face by a wooden frame, the Muqarnas appears to be suspended miraculously, held up by divine will alone. Brilliant hues of seven-colored tiles create a verdant abstract garden, an enfolding, welcoming space intimating more perfect harmonies. The portal is bordered by Quranic inscriptions affirming the principles of Islam. Beneath it and above the door is an inscription by Ali Riza. The construction of this mosque has been ordered by the most noble in the line of earthly sovereigns, the most honorable in personal courage, the highest in rank, the strongest in argument and proof, he who unites the best of justice and of goodwill, dust of the holy threshold of the Prophet, Abu Muzaffar Abbas al-Husayni al-Musawi al-Safavi Bahadur Khan. Prayer carpets rendered in ceramic hang beside the entrance, a prelude to the act of worship within. The passageway of the Royal Mosque, like that of the Lutfallah, also had to be curved so that its prayer wall would point southwest towards Mecca. In keeping with the classic form of the mosque, which evolved in Iran, the Royal Mosque, there is neither monotonous sameness nor abrupt transition. Always there are shifting views and changing surfaces and space. Its great dome is a translucent vision with arabesque rhythms of life coursing through the rich green of nature. A blue band intones the words of the Holy Quran, while below it angular letters invoke the name and manifold attributes of God. In the Muslim world, the mosque is more than a sacred building. It is the physical center of the community of believers, for Islam is not only a faith, but a way of life. Like the Great Maidan, the Royal Mosque is a supremely balanced composition. For as the entrance portal dominates the Royal Maidan, it is the deeper, darker sanctuary which soars above the Royal Mosque's court. There are no private, walled-off areas, for Islam has no priesthood, and all believers are equal before God. The huge dome reverberates with the symbolic and physical meanings of Muslim prayer as waves of pattern and sound echo the divine and ascend toward the sunburst symbolic of God. The Royal Mosque is an awesome monument, not only to Abbas and to the Esfahan which he restored to greatness, but also to the faith which was the lifeblood of Iran. It and the Great Maidan were the supreme achievements of Safavi architecture and outlived Abbas's state, as he surely knew they would. The great Shah died in 1629. His descendants ruled for nearly a century more, supported not by their ability, but by the system Shah Abbas had created. They and their achievements were pale reflections of the great king. In 1714, under the last of the Safavids, Sultan Hussein, a seminary was completed, which repeats in all its forms the creations of Abbas a century before. Its rectangular accents recall the great Maidan itself. Its dome rises like a smaller and less eloquent offspring of the Royal Mosque, and its decoration repeats earlier ceramic patterns but in drier terms. Sultan Hussein's building reflects his reign. The stable order created by Abbas had undergone a century of slow decline and careless leadership. And in 1722, Isfahan was besieged and captured by Afghan invaders. The Safavid dynasty expired. Shah Abbas's great social order collapsed, and Isfahan's noble history was brutally eclipsed. But this the young Italian traveler, Ambrosio Bembo, did not see. What survives is not the memory of defeat, but that of glory. The image of the city abides. It was a city whose face was radically transformed by one man, Shah Abbas. He left a legacy to future generations which few rulers have ever equaled. Certainly, the great Shah must have shared the feelings of so many who have seen it since, that Isfahan is half the world.